Razzleberry here, and we're going to try out some new things that I've just gotten in the mail. So I'd like to share them with you. First, we have a new stamp set. It's actually a stamp and stencil set from Altenew called Never Stop Dreaming, and it's got a beautiful rose spray and a bunch of really nice sentiments. And then it has, as you can see, a well-loved already stencil set. And so we're just going to get started. I'm going to begin by using my Misty, and sorry about the glare there. Now what I have done, Brutus Monroe has a new sticky mat that is really awesome, but they're sold out. So what I've done while I'm waiting for that to come back in stock is I've taken one of the Cricut sticky mats that I just had that laying around, and I started using it sort of like you would with the Brutus Monroe sticky mat. So I've got an A2 size piece of white 80-pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White, and I use those lines on the mat to kind of line up and make sure that my panel is straight. I don't know that that's necessary while we're doing our stenciling, but that's what I do. And I keep it in the Misty just to hold it in place. It's a huge stamp, so when you're putting it in your Misty, you got to be really careful that you get all the air bubbles burped out. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So what I think I want to do is just have a beautiful spray right over the top edge of our card panel. So I've got that set up, and I am going to use Hero Arts Intensified Black. I like that for multi-purpose coloring. I'm going to ink up my stamp real good. I told you I was going to show you how to burp it, and then I forgot. So what I do to make sure that the air bubbles are out after it's stuck on the right hand side of my Misty, I just pull up the stamp, not all the way, but some of the way, and then I just roll it down, holding on to the back side. And that gets rid of any bubbles that might have been in there. You can do that all the way to the tip. And then to make sure it's down tight on the edges, you can just use your stamp again to just ink that up and push it down on the Misty all at once. So let's see what kind of an impression we're going to get there. I use my fist, but you can also use a Chucky sort of tool, or you can use a dry eraser. A little bit of pressure. See, I find with this bigger Misty, I have a hard time getting some of the impression the first time. So it helps to make sure that's back in the corner so you don't have double lines. And we'll go at it again. This time I'm putting some extra pressure there in the center where the image wasn't coming through. And that's a much better impression. I'm going to do that one more time because it still seems like it's lighter. And it's just being obstinate. So I'll put a little more ink on it and just put some pressure right there in the center. I don't find that I have that problem with the smaller one, but I like to use the larger one with the Misty. So that's all we need to do with our Misty. I like to clean off my stamp real quick, and I do that with baby wipes for black ink. So I'll get that just wiped down real quick so that it's not quite so dark. And then I just use a piece of paper towel to dry that off. And you can go back and do a better job later in the sink if you feel like it needs to be cleaned up more than that. So now we're going to get started with our stencil. And I found that because you arrange the stamp the way you want to, you can't necessarily assume that you're going to align any edge of the stencil with your card. You want to make sure that you can see the lines through the stencils, and that these scored lines in the stencil align with the floral images. So it looks like I'm going to have to move this over a little bit because it's rubbing the edge against the Misty here. So there we go. So now you can see the outlines of the stamp coming through the stencil. See that? And I'm going to use a little bit of Altenew Crisp Dye ink, and the color's olive. And I'm going to use a blending brush, my green blending brush, and I'm just going to ink that up pretty good. Now what I like to do is, instead of blending the same color, I like to give the images a little bit of a shadow. And so by doing that, I just blend like you would on a card, and you can see that instead of making sure that's all even, there's a little bit of shadow on one side. So I just do that, like I'm aiming up through the center of those leaves there, and you can see that the tips are lighter than the centers of them, and that just gives a little bit of a three-dimensional look to those leaves. And this color is a beautiful, almost a chartreuse, but it's really pretty. And we just blend each of the leaves through the stencil in the same way. And that's it for our green layer, our first layer. Now I'll go to the second stencil. Looking for the number on the stencil. There it is. It's marked up in the upper right hand corner. Now these stencils have two versions, or two different layers on them, and for this card I'm not going to use this base layer. I'm going to go to the first one that has some shading in it, and then you just, again, there's some scored lines to help you align this stencil with the floral images that you stamped. And that's what I'm going to do, is just get everything aligned up. And when it looks like I've found a general location where it belongs, then I make sure, again, that I can see the edges, the lines of the stamp come through my stencil. Now, I like doing this with this sticky mat so that it will hold down my stencil to the mat, and it kind of keeps it from moving. In this case, it's over the edge, so I'm going to use some magnets that have a little more power to them. Now the other thing that I am really bad about is when I blend, I tend to go over the edges. I forget that part of the card isn't covered, and I end up blending in places that I don't want to. So I just use a little bit of low tack tape to cover that up, so I don't have to worry about that. And now the next color of ink that I'm going to use is Altenew's Pinkalicious, and that's a crisp dye also. And I'll put my green brush away, get out my pink one, and I'm just going to load my brush up. And then I'm going to use a similar technique for the petals that I did for the leaves. So I don't want it all one color, I want to show some kind of shading. So I come from one direction and just kind of push up. See how that makes it darker down here at the base and lighter at the top. And I'm going to do the same thing with this flower. And you can just really play with it till it gets to the point where you're happy with what those petals look like with your first layer of. Again, you want to be careful because some of these other openings from the stencil are there. I'm trying to be conscious of that, so, and I put my finger over it so that I won't accidentally move in there. And see, with this one, I try to leave those edges really very light. And that's all the more there is to that layer. And now we can remove our stencil. I'm going to keep my tape because I might just use that on another layer. And I'm going to pull this away, and it's already starting to get exciting. Now, the third stencil has 2 layers that we're going to use. So we're going to begin with the one in the upper right hand corner. Same steps we used before, where we're going to line things up using the lines and the openings on the stencil to get it just right. Stick it down on our stencil and use our extra magnets. If I've just discovered magnets, really, and they are a wonderful tool to help make sure things don't move. I've got that wonky, so I'm gonna try that again. There, that's better. And again, this is going off the edge, so I'm gonna tape it down. Cover it up is what I should have said. And this next layer I'm going to use Altenew's Rubellite crisp dye ink. Keeping the same, I just use one pink brush for anything that's pink. And using the same techniques that I've talked about before, we're just going to blend in this, or stencil in the coloring. And it's just gorgeous. Again, I'm just going to stick my fingers over there so I don't accidentally blend somewhere that I don't want to be. See how I make this darker in the center than I do on the outer edges? Now, when I remove this, let me just show you what that looks like. And I'll just kind of keep an eye out. So this is one that we just did. See how that makes it look like the petal kind of tucks underneath those others? Just gives it a little more dimension. Now I'm going to flip the stencil over. So I was using this way, right? Now I'm going to flip it over and use the images on the other side of it. Same process, where we get everything all lined up. There. I'm going to take this down again. And now for our last layer, we're going to use Altenew Razzleberry. Same pink blending brush, and just going to blend these real quickly. And let's see how that went. Is that awesome or what? Just beautiful. Now for this next step, I'm going to remove my panel from the sticky mat. And the way to do that, I learned at the Brutus Monroe Crafty Staycation, was you just bend that back and let it curl up, and then kind of help it off the mat. And we'll just set that aside. Now I'm going to go back with my green brush. I'm not going to put any ink on it. I'm going to make sure my hands are clean, because I do tend to get, I'm an inky stamper, I tend to get ink all over the place, so I'm going to get any pink off my fingers that I had there. Again, I'm going to use just the ink that's on my green brush, and I'm just going to lightly blend that green onto my card panel. See how that just kind of draws that green out of where we stamped? And I'm just going to kind of go around the edge with that brush to just create a little additional interest and pull out that pretty green. The contrast between the green and the pink is just gorgeous, so let's just take advantage of it. You got to be really careful around the flower that you don't mix the pink and the green, but you can easily just do that by brushing from the outside in. And then I'll just get this corner real quick. It's just a very light touch. Do not use a heavy hand at all when you're doing that. And that's all there is to that. So the very last step then, I'm going to wipe some of this green up so I don't get it where I don't want it. It's probably better to use a microfiber cloth to do that. That tends to pick up better. Now I'm going to go back, but this time I'm going to use a smaller Misty. And I'm going to set my card panel in there. And I am going to pick one of these beautiful sentiments. So I just absolutely love the Never Stop Dreaming, so I think I'm just going to go with those two stamps. And I think I'm going to try to put it right in here. And then I like to use Altenew's Pigment ink, the Obsession color. This is such a beautiful, crisp ink, and I just love to use it for sentiments. So that's my trick for any sentiments. I get that inked up and stamp it. Now you go lightly so you don't spread the ink where you know, you can spread your stamp out if you press too hard, and it gives you kind of a sloppy look. And there we have it. Now I'm just going to glue that to the card base. That's not something I'll include in the, whoops, not something that I'll include in the video, but what a beautiful card to send to anybody. Thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoyed. Check out our blog at cutcolourandcreate.com. Thank you. Bye-bye.